Hello and welcome. I'm Katrina Green, Director of Property Management at Gray Residential and the host of this podcast called The Complex, which is going to cover topics related to multifamily development, multifamily properties. And, that's known on the street as an apartment complex, although that's not what we call it. So join me for some candid discussions on everything from trash removal, AI, workforce management, pest control. We want to bridge the gap between investors and frontline workers through innovative conversations and some idea sharing so that way we can grow together. Welcome. I'm excited to invite a former colleague of mine and someone that I've had so many laughs with over the years, I couldn't count them. But nonetheless, she has a very impressive resume. And the topic today is about remote work. The Gray Report has been talking off and on a lot about the impact of remote and hybrid work as it pertains to commercial real estate. And certainly there's an element that we need to talk about within multifamily from a lot of different viewpoints. And Lindsay brings all three viewpoints to the table. And so, Lindsay, tell us, a little bit about yourself, your current position, where you're at right now, and then a little bit about why you think I invited you to talk about remote work.
I'm assuming for the trash part. No, I'm just kidding. Hey, everybody. My name's Lindsay Martin. This is my first official podcast. So thank you, Katrina and Gray Capital, for having me. Hopefully you don't need to do too much editing, but thank you for the kind words. I am not originally a Midwesterner. I am from South Georgia, where I grew up, and then after college moved to New York City for 10 years. There I also worked in communications and PR in the editorial space, so a different kind of experience there, and then relocated to the Indy area with my native Hoosier husband, Michael. And so when I moved here, I was not sure what my keywords were for a job search. And my husband actually put me in touch with your former company, and that's how Katrina and I worked together, of course. And then
I think there was a dual introduction, which I think is fun because it was such a long time ago, or it feels like such a long time ago, but we were connected.
It was like 7 years ago.
Yeah, we were connected because we were both, active members. Well, absolutely. But also, members of a co-working space.
Yes.
And that was maybe not a brand new concept. It was a newer concept, certainly for the Midwest. And so I just find that interesting in terms of how we were able to connect. There were some other pieces there, but initially, that was how some parties knew other parties. And it was like, wait a minute, I think Lindsay and Katrina would really hit it off and, have a great business relationship. And, co-working space, or I guess environments, will come up again later.
Yeah. Shout out to the Hatch for being one of Indy's first spaces like that.
Yeah.
So that's how Katrina and I started working together, kind of through the power of networking and relationships, which, is a very prevalent thing here in Indy. I feel like even though it's a big city, it feels like a small town. And then through that, I ended up leaving that company and moving to a larger company here in downtown Indianapolis. That's a global company, about 80,000 people in the manufacturing space. And I am a corporate communications manager. So led all their internal communications for, specific business units, internal things for the chief administrative office, HR, ethics and compliance, global facilities, just a whole bag of fun things.
So when people say don't kill the messenger, are they
literally they're talking about me
about
and
you?
My colleagues. Yes. But it really ties into what we're here to talk to you about today because, supporting employees through internal communication was obviously more important than ever before during the pandemic in the last 3 years. So worked a lot through that, educating employees on the latest from the government, the WHO, the CDC, the company, how they could report COVID cases and just all those different things that we all experienced. And then I guess we can now say post-pandemic. I'm kind of scared to say that out loud, knock on wood.
No, I think it's okay.
But post-pandemic also led the efforts and communications efforts to bring employees back to the office. So, that was a large workforce that were boots on the ground hourly plant workers in addition to corporate office employees. So also just managing that duality of what is perceived to be hardship and privilege, depending on the type of employee you talk to.
Yeah.
So a lot there, a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. So you had to initially communicate, everyone's going home, and then you also then had to say, hey, time to come back.
Or time to say, hey, you actually don't get to come home. Like, you still have to come to work every day.
Yeah.
You work in a plant.
Yeah.
And your families are at risk and all that kind of stuff. So,
and certainly in multifamily, we were, we were critical infrastructure the whole time. So there wasn't, there wasn't some of that going on, but then there was like envy of, people in multifamily and leasing associates and managers, that were there and showing up every day. But, I think then that's what sparked a lot of the conversation just about how to retain talent, in an environment now post-pandemic, that offers that to some people. And then obviously hybrid options are there too. So, we're going to talk about remote work from Lindsay's perspective, of being the person communicating with corporate leaders and their motivation for needing people to come back to the office. And then also, Lindsay, you yourself at the time, you were a hybrid or you were a, remote worker at an apartment community. And then also at one point you worked for a property management company. So that's, when I referenced all three, sort of viewpoints, like when we decided we wanted to talk about this, like you fit for just multi-perspective. So let's talk a little bit first about, just why it's important that remote work is an option. Right now that was important to you and has been really. Yeah. Why do you think it's important? Just broad spectrum. Why is it so important to allow remote work?
Yeah, I think that there's several things that are important for it. I know, now if your company is not talking about and doing more than just talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, then that's a problem. But in this, this world that we're living in today, there is more focus and care and value put into mental health and a work-life balance and things like that. And so I think one thing is the beauty of remote work is the time that you get back from commuting. So for me, we moved 45 minutes north of the downtown area during the pandemic based on the fact that we were a hybrid. And my husband's fully remote, but I went into hybrid after being a primarily on-site employee. And we had a child and just felt like this was the time to do that because I wouldn't have to be commuting so much when I was previously in the office 4 to 5 days a week. So, that's one thing, just getting back an hour and a half a day of your life to spend with your family or to go to the gym or just to do something for yourself is a huge value add. One of the other really important things that has come out of this, expansion of the idea of remote work, it is equity. Especially for global companies, you think about how many employees were remote and always had to take meetings on Zoom or Skype or whatever the technology was. They were never connected in person to employees. My husband has always been remote. So, you miss that camaraderie, you miss the culture, you miss those things that are important in building relationships and feeling like you belong somewhere. And so I think the remote work that now you're on calls where everyone is remote or everyone is in a different place, it really has brought some equity to that space for, employees that don't live near an office and kind of bridge that gap. And I've heard that feedback through, voice of customer surveys and all different kinds of ways. I have heard that actual documented feedback.
Yeah. And I think, in the multifamily world, depending on size of company, anyone that's ever worked on site at a property that's close to the corporate office can tell you that they do get the most attention, positively or negatively.
Yeah.
They're, those communities are the ones that people are driving through and just arriving at. Sure. And then we organically just maybe know more about the individuals that are there. And is that fair? Yeah. Because that visibility isn't the same, right. Sort of worldwide or globally or statewide or, whatever your market looks like. So, I guess that's the benefit on the remote side, or at least just utilizing that technology to make sure that it's not just the people right in front of you that get, some care and keeping and FaceTime. Like everyone needs it in equal measure.
And I think to your point too, it has pushed companies and leaders and communicators to get more creative in being more inclusive. So, if we now know, of course, that if you're closer to the corporate office or whatnot, you have more visibility with the leaders. They know more about you. Well, when everyone is somewhere else, then it pushes them to have to get creative with what kind of, maybe they have a new type of meeting that's hybrid. You can come in and it's, a live webcast. That's something we transitioned to during the pandemic and post-pandemic. It also, I think, just kind of nudged that idea that, hey, we need to be more inclusive of all types of workers.
Yeah. Yeah. So what, you've recently made a career move. Was it a non-negotiable that you had opportunity to do remote work?
Yes.
Full-time remote work or part-time?
No, part-time.
Yeah.
What was non-negotiable was flexibility. And the understanding that this is not 1975, I mean, truly, like our parents, both my parents grew up working in finance, and my mom worked, both my parents worked at a bank, and, I went to after school care, and so did my siblings. And that has stayed with me, those things of not being able to go home with other kids and have play dates or whatever. And I remember my mom getting home from work at 6 o'clock at night and her feet hurting and her being tired. And, she used to say if we didn't eat out of a brown paper bag that our dinner, we wouldn't know what it was, because they were always just on the way to like a sporting, one of our practices or after work. And she's probably going to kill me for saying that on air, but I just won't send her the link. But, it's just a different time that we live in now. And I think that it's a lot more intentional now of, hey, we're working to live. We're not living to work.
So if during your search, just out of curiosity, when you were looking for some other options, did you find that was a key word in most of the employers or the, ads or postings that you were seeing, that they're all including some statement about whether it's hybrid or remote? And is it almost always now offering something like that, at least in your world? It was?
Yes. Yeah. I think with corporate companies, especially because it has been proven now that we surpassed financial targets. When I say we, I mean collectively, like companies all over the world.
Yeah.
Like we can do just as good a work, and actually sometimes better not being in the office, because you do have less socialization and less distractions in those ways. So it is possible. I don't think, the older generation of leaders can no longer say you have to sit in this chair from this time to this time for us to know you're working.
Yeah, there's probably still some of that.
Well, there's definitely still some of that.
Still some of that going on.
Their argument is a lot less backed by truth.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit then. Clearly we can all agree that it's not something that's changing. We obviously see that in every way, shape, or form. As it relates to environment, though, let's bring it into our apartment communities, our apartment complexes. We don't say complex, but everyone else calls us that, so I guess I'll say it. You said that both your husband and you were remote. He was full-time remote and you were part-time remote. And were you in an apartment for any part of that?
Oh, yeah, for all of that. So right before the pandemic, that was when the housing market was starting to get really good for sellers. And we sold our house and wanted to decide, hey, do we want to build or buy? And we really weren't sure what area we wanted to be in. We were trying to start a family. There's just a lot of ifs. And so I moved here, like I said, from New York City. So for me, apartment life as an adult was what I had known. And I just said, hey, let's go rent something. I think that makes sense right now. Let's take the maintenance off of our plate. Let's get somewhere with a community that is close to the highways, easier to get to work and things like that. And it was really great. It was so great for that time period. However, during the pandemic, we did start a family, and no one told us daycare lists are year long. And so once we had the baby, well, first of all, before the baby, I had to set up in the living space. It was an open like kitchen, dining, living room.
Yeah.
I had to set up a desk over the side in there that kind of made us look like Hoarders USA. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, you just don't want your everyday desk, like in your everyday living space.
Yeah.
Really. And then my husband had to work out of our bedroom.
Okay.
It was a 2-bedroom apartment, but, so I guess actually one of us was in the guest bedroom for a little while. But then once we had a baby, obviously that wouldn't work. And so what we had to do is hire a nanny for 6 months once I went back to work, until we could get into a daycare. So my husband actually had to go either work in the conference center down in our apartment lobby, or go work out of a co-working space.
I love that you called it a lobby. We might call it a clubhouse.
Clubhouse. So sorry. I'm used to New York City lobby.
Okay. Yeah.
So
that's fine.
If y'all want to just take it up a notch, we can call it a lobby, or we can call it a clubhouse. That's fine. Clubhouse sounds more like a resort.
So he actually had to, and also I just I'm picturing you and him.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone's ever said that you were quiet, like that you had a, she maybe a little bit more, but what was that like? Were you competing with each other? Did you have to schedule calls on opposite times so that way you weren't interrupting each other's work?
Well, what's funny is I always tell people now that I never knew how much of a loud talker my husband was until this happened.
Oh, okay.
My husband's kind of quiet and reserved. We're very opposite. But when he's on work calls, he turns into a radio DJ or something, like he's talking loud, he's in sales, so he's passionate and he's selling and doing his thing. And there were times when I was just like, wow, I cannot concentrate, or like I felt like people could hear it in the feedback of my call, to your point.
Yeah.
I would say the biggest issue was because I was out in the living space. Yes, that was challenging. You couldn't come make lunch. You couldn't come get a drink. You couldn't walk behind me because you could be seen, even if I had the back of my, my screen grayed out or background on. So there were definitely some challenges there. And I think the biggest challenge was, for me, the fact that I worked and lived in the same room for 2 years.
Yeah.
Like, I did not leave that area except for 2 hours at night for 2 years.
Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah.
And
all the walls were white. So it was literally kind of like living in an insane asylum towards the end.
Gosh, I mean, just thinking about it, and everybody, I'm sure, is just like, well, is the answer more space? Is the answer different space? Is the answer, more opportunities in those common spaces? Yeah. Because I think the reality behind, just saying, well, if you're going to be a remote worker, then just get yourself a 3-bedroom instead of a 2-bedroom, or get yourself a 2-bedroom instead of a 1-bedroom, whatever that looks like. It kind of boils down to how much square footage do you need, and then for your office area. And then in addition to that, how do you isolate it? So in the amenity space, like the lobby space, what was there for him? How did that work? Was it a separate space? Nobody could hear him? Did he have to reserve it? What was that like?
We actually both used the lobby conference center a lot.
Yes.
So it was a door access entry room with 3 screens and a keyboard that you could plug into and a printer. And then there was a private boardroom. So it was probably like an 8-person table with a sliding door that closed it off. I will say there was no soundproofing or anything. So, you could always hear in the next room or whatever. But, we both used that a lot. And then there was a big open clubhouse that you could sit in and work if you just wanted a change of scenery. But that was how we utilized that space. I personally think, so we just bought a house this past October. Our 1 year in a rental turned into, I think, 3.
Okay.
So we bought a house this past October, and that was a challenge we had never had before. Was, okay, we went from needing 2, maybe 3 bedrooms to 5 bedrooms, if you're really talking about home office.
Yeah.
And in Indy, and around Indy, I mean, that takes your budget up significantly.
Oh, of course it does.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I've read is one of the reasons that so many apartment communities are being built is because housing is so expensive now. And a lot of people are choosing this rental life to figure out either, hey, where do I want to live? Or they can't afford to buy a house right now, or what that may be. So I feel like, that expectation to, buy a 3-bedroom or rent a 3-bedroom apartment if you're going to need to work from home. Well, that's not in the budget either,
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, unless there's an escalation in, pay because you're finding these new roles. Yeah. But even still, that's not how anybody wants to spend their, whatever that increase looks like, or whatever that change of pay looks like. They're not just like, okay, cool, now I can get a 3-bedroom. I think we're probably more in a make it, just make it work situation. Pardon the pun. I felt like that was a good pun, actually. And trying to do that in apartment life and in apartment living. And you're right, people do choose to rent for a lot of different reasons. And, we'll leave all the data and the analytics up to the Great Report, because they're really good at that.
No observation.
No, it's definitely a lot of variables going into why we continue to build apartment communities. Yeah. And I think what's important to talk about is, what are we building? What could we retrofit? How can we really serve the hybrid worker? Like, I think that, clearly a conference room is not a new concept.
Right.
And, but I think now, like, let's expand on that and say, well, actually, remember the Hatch had, they had a sound booth?
Yes.
And I was obsessed with it. And because, a long time ago, I felt like I should probably be on radio or in a podcast or something like that. I've known this for a while.
To your dream come true.
Yeah, but I thought, well, that's genius. That's a private space, and is it that the operators, is it that we need to cater to, if we're maybe in a student housing area, what do their assignments look like? What do they have to turn in? What does a hybrid worker have to do to sort of prove some of that productivity? Are there some, if I had to record a training, can I do that in my apartment when I have a toddler, that might have something to say? And you can't just be like, hey, shush, I did that. Like, what are the things that, we have to do in our day-to-day work? And are there some things that we should be offering outside of the 8-person conference room? Like, would you say that 8-person conference room should have been broken up into 3 pods?
I will say we use the conference room much more than the shared room. That had the 3 screens. So there was the 2 rooms. So there was the private conference room.
Yeah.
And then there was the room that, like a business center like you have now in department communities.
Right.
I think it depends on where obviously the office is. Like, is it around, the apartments are. Like, is it around a lot of offices? Is it a high, professional area? But I do think there's a better utilization of space. My company now, my office has the call booths too. So we have like cubicles. We have for people that come in 3 or more days a week. We have open seating or Gen Pop, just where you can plug in a computer and, come and go. And then we have call booths. I think we have a total of 6.
What's the call booth? People? Like, paint a picture for me.
So it's like the rooms at the Hatch. So it looks like you're going to go in there and go into like Back to the Future. Honestly, it's like these 3 tall, skinny booths with a door on them that's frosted out.
Yeah, okay.
And they're soundproof. And then you walk in, you go in, and it's tiny. Like, once you sit down, you can't like stretch your arms out or anything, but there's just a desk, a light, and you can have calls and not disrupt the people around you. Because that's another thing is office etiquette. We all know apartment etiquette is a struggle sometimes too.
I was just going to say, like, we've never, soundproofing, isn't a thing, and it made me wonder, like, did your neighbors hear your calls?
Yeah.
Did more people home during the day? It causes parking problems because y'all are working hybrid, so we used to have
slower.
Oh yeah, so there's that. There's like sort of a litany of challenges there that as an operator, if you're a new development or if you have an existing community, what can we look at? And amenity space, I think, is something we should all just be honest with ourselves about. Like, we build these like large, beautiful amenity spaces. And then, you talk to a manager or a leasing person, you say, how often is somebody up there? And they're like, well, last Wednesday, Joseph came.
His dog up there for 20 minutes. Yeah.
Is it smart for operators to break up those large spaces? And it's hard because the aesthetic, we feel like the aesthetic is what sells people. Like, that's the grand, this just beautiful area, and that's what your big images are online. And it's like, is that what's really bringing people in? But if hybrid and remote work is important and those are keywords in searches, like, what can we really do? Like, those mini booths, what about in the actual unit? Like, I know of a community in Evansville, Indiana that is hyper focused on this live work concept. So they've built apartments, and some of the floor plans actually have like a frosted partition. So they didn't really add space, and they didn't really add a room. There's probably just some square footage there, but because they, didn't have the expense or structural, and light still comes in. And I'm just like, well, that was smart, because then you have this place where you don't have to worry about what's behind you. You don't have to keep your kitchen clean.
Yeah.
Because the visual in there, and I don't, does your company have policies on, Zoom calls or digital calls or, whatever that like talks about what is appropriate in the background, or talks about like, are you allowed to do that? That's somebody's personal space that you're requiring them to use. But does anyone talk about that?
Definitely gets murky. The first thing I wanted to say in response to what you just said is that sounds like a super cool property. I do personally think after living through, working from home in an apartment with other people that need to work in the apartment too, that if I was a builder especially, I would absolutely start incorporating that into new builds. Like you said, some little space. It doesn't have to have extra cabinets. It doesn't have to have anything but just a space and maybe like you said, a frosted privacy glass or something like that. A landing, if it's a 2-story apartment or townhouse type apartment or whatever, where, a landing, like what can you use for that space? You either throw toys and a couch there or it's your office, something like that, where there is an option, a desk and a kitchen even, even if it's not the ideal space, like something, I think, because I personally, from what I'm seeing in the trends and the feedback is that this is not going to go away. Like this is the future of the landscape of the workforce.
Yeah. Obviously, for sure. I think the fact that we talk about it so much, and especially on the commercial side, like what are people doing with some of, all of these offices and how do you get people to come back in? And then even on a hybrid, in a hybrid environment, you still have to have the space. So, do you have a lot of square footage that you don't need? But you kind of mentioned, how there's common spaces within that. So not everybody has their own. Yeah. I keep saying like, my daughter's 17, just started her senior year. And I keep wondering if down the road, having an office is going to mean that she made it. Whereas, right now it's, I want to go home. I want to.
At my last company that I just left, I was there for 5 years and huge, like very well-known, huge company. Even the C-suite leaders didn't have an office. They also were open seating.
Yeah.
The same kind of desks that we had.
Yeah.
They were ergonomic desks that went up and down. They had the privacy panels, but they were cubicles.
Yeah.
That they had the same thing.
Do you think they liked that?
I think it depends on the culture of a company. That was their approach to workplace culture for many reasons. But it drove more collaboration, which they feel produces innovation.
Fair. Okay, so maybe Finley won't care about it. I don't know. When she comes here, that's her most exciting thing is like to see everybody's offices. And
let's be honest, because we like to decorate them.
Well, yes,
that's the main reason.
Yeah, so when we talk about remote, being the future, I also wonder if there's going to be a piece of the future depending on what they, depending on what that, group of their kids now. Yeah. But how are they going to look at success? Because if remote and hybrid is normal, and I remember thinking probably years ago, like when I heard somebody got to work from home, like that was glamorous. That was
pure luxury.
That was like, how did you, right. Yeah. So once it becomes mainstream, do we want that anymore? And probably like, the masses are still going to enjoy some of that so long as like, we don't want it to be where our apartments though are pushing people out because we're nowhere near being able to serve that community. It's hard to retrofit, but like the community I'm talking about, it's called Post House in Evansville. And, I've been back and forth a little bit with the manager there, Jacob. And, it's more than just a partition. It's like, floor outlets, Ethernet, trying to avoid the situation where your, Wi-Fi is
kind of like a smart building
overloaded a little bit. Definitely. And they're identified specifically as live work floor plans, so it's not named, the oak tree.
I think that's a hard space, and that's an interesting space because I think that is a super smart, cool approach. But the other turn of that, so my new company, when I left my last company a month ago, they were requiring you come back in 2 days a week. And then if you had an intern or a new hire, if you were a people manager, you had to come in 3 days a week.
Okay.
And so did the new hire. So, now my new company, I can be fully remote if I want and just come in as needed and use one of those Gen Pop desks. And I actually chose to come in 3 days a week so I could have a desk. That's the minimum for having your own desk space.
Okay.
And I haven't had that in 5 years. And so I always said I used to lead art and architecture tours for my old office because it's a pretty, they worked with a really well-known architect and all that kind of stuff. So one thing I'd always tell people is that you have to flex a muscle in your brain that you're not used to using when you constantly have to pack up your laptop, take it home, tack up your laptop, go to a meeting, pack up your laptop, go to a, centralized social area to eat lunch, pack up your laptop, go to get some, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're constantly having to restart your brain. And that can be exhausting too.
Yeah.
For me, I have found I like having a dedicated space where I have my things and my stuff and it's my space, and my brain knows it's time to go to work. But also working from home, you're always working. Like I just was always, even if I wasn't actively working, it was on my brain more because I think it was my work space. When you're growing up, they say don't do homework in your bed because your brain thinks it's time to sleep.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with working from home all the time.
Well, don't you think that's somewhat contradictory then? So we talk about wanting to work from home for work-life balance, and then what we end up doing is, maybe it's work-life harmony instead, because I agree. And where I was before, we were required to come in to the office 2 days a week. And, here I come here or to a site 5 days a week. And I ask myself sometimes, like, what's the opportunity cost in that? Like, what am I missing at home? Well, chores. Pretty much just chores. Yeah.
Well, I think that was the perception, me, myself included, of work from home, better work-life balance, don't have to get dressed, to the nines and all that.
Yeah.
Don't have to buy work clothes and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But I think that now that we've been through it, our thinking has evolved. And we're like, oh, wait a minute. It is still a luxury, but like with anything else, there's give and take.
Right.
And there's boundaries.
So now we want both.
Ultimately,
now we want both.
It can be summed up in one word: flexibility. You want the option. I want to have an option that I can go into an office, but I don't want to be told what days that has to be, or maybe even for some people how many days.
Yeah. So how in the world do we continue to recruit talent to work at our apartment communities if and I mean, it could be really hard for someone that maybe really wants flexibility. That's not been something that in multifamily, from a staffing perspective, that we would ever have called ourselves. Like we have a little bit of rigidity as it pertains to someone else because we're this like horrible combination of like a retail storefront because there's an expectation that we're there. But also, there's so many things that we're doing behind the scenes that no one ever sees and nobody needs to see.
And your customer service.
And we're customer service. And where's the balance? And maybe you tell me, when you lived in an apartment community, how often was a physical interaction or engagement critical to your decision making, whether that was choosing, that apartment community initially or deciding to renew? How critical was the face-to-face, or the fact that you had like somewhere you knew you could go between certain hours and see someone and engage?
For me, the initial, when you meet someone, the tour, that's like hugely impactful, because that's like the first glimpse into the experience.
Even if you've seen video, virtual tour. Okay.
Because that's the first glimpse for me into the experience of living there. And that might be because I have worked in so much customer service, not in the same way, but just having to serve people.
Right.
That if that's not a great experience and I don't see anyone else, a manager around or something, that might turn me off. Mm-hmm. But I will say that even when I had frustrations with some of the leasing staff or something like that, when a manager or even a regional manager would follow up, it was like, okay, everybody has to learn, everybody has, but it's that communication and that customer service, as long as it comes from someone somewhere, I think is really important. But I think this kind of goes back to the struggle of empathy with people that have to work on site and people that don't. There's a level of it that is just circumstance. Like it just is what it is.
Right.
A dentist has to go to work. A dentist cannot do their job from home.
Yes.
So it's like you cannot lease apartments from home. Like you have to be face to face, and at some point, sometime.
I mean, I would challenge that and say that
every leasing agent in America hates me that I just said that. By the way,
no, they love you that you said that. They love you that you said that.
They want to be on site.
Well, no. That is a level of job protection, though. So if you're saying that it is still, crucial to, changing you or transitioning you from just like almost there to definitely there on that buying decision, then no, I think that they would support, what you said. And I think it just goes back to people want, I don't know if this is the best phrasing, but like you want your cake, you want to eat it too. So even leasing associates want flexibility, and leasing associates would want the opportunity to work from home. And so then, in a multifamily space, it's like, do we there's a lot of conversation around centralization of some of these leasing tasks. And, can you talk to someone on the phone if that's what you want, that's the experience you're choosing? Can you talk to someone on the phone and have a great conversation and feel very connected? And can that get you over the finish line regardless of ever, shaking their hand, like,
Sorry I waited so long for you to finish that thought.
It's okay. but is it's the question that is kind of swirling all around all of our conversations, as it pertains to AI, as it pertains to experience and customer experience and quantifying what that looks like. And I'm not saying that we're trying to figure out what the bare minimum is, but what I am saying is, is it that offices could be open less as long as you knew and could count on them being there in that window of time? And could a leasing agent
absolutely
work at home and work leads and make calls and do all of that? Like, you think that there would be anything lacking from your perspective as a renter?
No.
If they get to experience remote work?
Not as a renter, because I feel like the only time I would really go into the office for a true face-to-face need to talk to you would be if I was going to get my mail. And I'd be like, well, I'm right here, so I might as well,
Because your mail room is in like a centralized place.
Yes.
And that's why you have to go.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, I might as well just tell them I need that maintenance request put in or whatever, or ask them about a follow-up on something since I'm here.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's totally reasonable. And that is flexibility for everyone.
Yeah.
You have hours. So instead of having your hours on site be 8 to 5, they're Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8 to 5 or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think even one day a week to be able to work from home is a game changer.
Is it?
Yes.
One day?
Yes.
What about maintenance? Do they get to work from home? Or is that those circumstances?
When you're to solve your industry's problems.
Right. Well, then this is
well, maintenance, that's a hard one because of proximity. You can't be on call if you live 30 minutes, an hour away in the middle of the day, right?
Sure. And that's where there's I don't want to say there's animosity between,
right, but
as one of our directors says, front of the house and back of the house.
Yeah, exactly.
That could and probably did create some divide.
Yep.
And you mentioned a divide earlier too between like the difference between, corporate staff or satellite staff or however that goes. Like we can't, we have yet to figure out how we could ever let, the maintenance side have that flexibility and have that remote work. And then in this spirit of, equal treatment, but they're two different jobs.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just have to be like, they're two different jobs, but how do you manage, do you manage people where you're at now? Do you have some people under you? I don't remember.
I'm an individual contributor and I like it that way. Currently.
You're so lucky.
Yeah.
Managing people is hard.
Well, I think that's the other thing about having the remote option is, of course, everyone already does their best to invest in top talent, but you really got to make sure you're getting strong talent that you can trust to work from home, that you can trust to do those cold calls and the leasing and help you hit numbers, because otherwise, and I think that's the point we're at where it does feel nice to work for a company that's like, hey, you're an adult, get your work done and come in when you need to and we're cool. But not every industry or office or whatever it may be is that way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that and we have the ability certainly to quantify, work, whether we're using just sophisticated CRMs and, watching people in the path. But that's the other component is the technology piece. So you have to have investors and owners and operators that are willing to put the money in the software side so that way you can monitor productivity, because, when I managed an apartment community, like I could look at my leasing agent and see, what she was doing. And we obviously were recapping, all day kind of in a way, whereas, if that shifts and we're not there. And I think it all boils down to the resident will dictate, the prospect will always dictate what we should be doing and what their needs are.
Yeah, they'll let you know.
Speaking of which, I think you had, I had taken some notes.
One of my nice to have.
Yeah, we were just talking about, I wanted Lindsay to, obviously have some kind of background on what we were going to talk about. So it wasn't a total surprise. And so I, asked, what are some pet peeves about, apartment living, and then also, what would be some sort of like nice to haves you want to go there with them.
Yeah.
Let's go with pet peeves first.
Okay.
In terms of apartment living.
A few of them.
You have a few of them.
So one of my big pet peeves when you haven't, like the last apartment community I lived in had indoor hallways.
Mm-hmm.
And they did not match the care of the clubhouse or the apartments. And that's a problem. I know that's expensive and probably the last place you want to put money when you're looking at your budget. But to walk around and just see like water stains or, you know, the paint's a different color in certain areas or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
It was just like, that doesn't feel great.
It's funny that I think, you know, it's hard because like to us, it's like, what is that space and what's important about it? Like it's a corridor, it's a means, it's a channel to get you from one place to the other, but more important maybe than we realize.
Too, at our ages, I mean, we were in our late 30s and we weren't living there. You know, it wasn't like we were fresh out of college and just like all we could afford was an apartment and we were just happy to be there out of our parents' house. You know, like we're adult professionals and we want to come home to a place that reflects the place we are in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And every square foot of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. What else?
Yeah. Including, you know, the grounds, the pool, like all those things.
Those things are important to you? Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. I think the follow-up is obviously the most important because just that is where the frustration really comes. Like if you're having a bug issue or a water leak issue or whatever the issue is and you follow up and, you know, we would hear a lot, well, you know, it's just out of our hands. It's at corporate or it's at a regional level. And it's like, oh, that's funny because we can't get in touch with the regional or the corporate office. So, you know, and we had a great experience. Like it was a great place to live. But I do think having that open lines of communication. But sorry, right now we're talking about pet peeves. So gross hallways was one. No, lack of communication was the next one.
Yeah, lack of communication, which, you know, that's funny. Talk to me about that just for a second. Yeah. What is your preferred means of communication? Is it email, text, phone?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, it again depends on what we're talking about here. I think when you're needing real-time answers or updates, the phone is the best.
Yeah. Like a conversation on the phone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or like, you know, there were several times where someone was supposed to come to our apartment, whether it was like regular maintenance to change the filters or like someone we had coming to do something and the front desk would tell me because we had a newborn, you know, I'll let you know what time range that they'll be there or what day. And we weren't told. And then I'm sitting there like not in a position to welcome guests, you know, into the home, if you know what I mean. And so those kinds of things were frustrating to me. Yeah. And I would have preferred probably on the phone just for the immediate knowledge.
Right.
But I think email or whatever, I don't think that, you know, I don't have a preference necessarily, just communication, period.
Yeah.
Just,
do what you say you'll do.
Yeah. And especially when you're like, I'm going to write this down and I'll follow it, and then it doesn't happen. And listen, everybody has a lot going on, but you have to have integrity. Yeah. When you're in customer service or you lose confidence.
Well, that's our one job is to communicate well with you. Yeah. I mean, we're there to serve or service in a sales industry. Yeah. So it's pretty important.
Communicate if you're late on rent. I'm just kidding. We were never late on rent.
That's completely fair.
But
that's, you know what I mean? Funny that we've figured out.
Oh, your lease-in's coming up and, you know, we really need you to let us know.
Yeah. So, we're on that. No question. What other pet peeves?
People on lower levels that complain about noise. Listen, America, or whoever's listening, if you're moving in to a apartment and it's not on the top floor, you're going to hear noise.
Yeah.
Like that should just be a given.
Yeah.
So we never had a complaint. We were on the top floor. It was 3 floors. We never had a complaint until right at the very end. Our son had like just turned 1 and the people that lived below us were older and like retired older, you know, we're home a lot during the day. And they made a complaint that we were running laps back and forth.
Oh, wow.
Our apartment and jumping up and down.
Okay.
And I'm like, did they know we had a child? Or did they think we were just upstairs, like jumping around and running? Unclear. Regardless, I told the front desk, I said, I'm going to be really honest. Like, we have a toddler and like, I don't know how to stop that. And she was like, well, you can't say that. We need you to say you'll try, you know? And so we can go back to tell them, which I get it, but it's like, I mean, we weren't doing anything crazy. If anything, I was always like, don't do that. Don't chomp. Don't, you know, I was very cognizant of it. But
I think there's been a hypersensitivity, not a hypersensitivity. That's maybe not the right phrase. Yes. And honestly, in the very beginning, when everyone was home at the same time, all of a sudden everyone was on each other's nerves for everything, bird feeders,
the apartment and outside the apartment.
Everything. And I know it's just a stressful time, but even we just did some, a full property walk last week. So we walked, well over 100 units over the course of a couple of hours. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to say that I was surprised how many people we sort of intruded on because they were, working from home. But also I didn't see one person that was in like a designated work from home space. It was like, couches, things like that. But nonetheless, more people home during the day, more people, more problems.
I think one thing that goes into, it's under pet peeve, but I really want to move it to helpful amenities. I think one thing that would be a huge value add for apartment communities to support people that work from home, to support parents, to support people that just work in general and have busy lives is, I'm trying to figure out how to say this, handyman services. Like, it would be nice. I'm moving into the apartment to drop maintenance for myself. Like, I don't want to mow the yard. I don't want to have to do all those things.
Yeah.
So to be able to, and I know that maintenance crews have so much work. I mean, they have a huge portfolio of work to service all these apartments in these big communities. So whether it's like one person dedicated to handyman services or a contractor or whatever it may be, but someone that could come hang my pictures and mirror for me, someone that could come change light bulbs in the special kind of light. So, whatever it may be, I think having that would be incredible.
I mean, we do. Some of us do.
Some disregard.
Well, no, I don't think disregard. I don't think that is common. I think it's actually the opposite because, we've educated our maintenance techs in our offices to say those are your belongings and we don't want to be responsible for them, so we're not going to hang them. We're not going to hang your mirror because we don't want to break your mirror.
So maybe however, and then
I mean, in a sense, you kind of do already in that giant lease agreement, and you sign a lot in there. So in a way, you've requested us to do something. We've agreed to do it, but where I have worked somewhere in the past where we had what we called top hat services. And so they set aside, 4 or 5 hours or just like Friday afternoon. And people could just sign up for the slots. And it was for things like that. So it was controlled. And it was like people would, at one of the properties, people would actually call and they would say, did I make it in time to get a slot? Like where it was widely known and it was obviously valued. And if I remember right, that started because somebody drilled their TV mount into the sprinkler line.
Mutually beneficial.
Right. Mutually beneficial. So, it kind of started with a little bit of level control there, but then turned into this like service, like you said.
So then I don't have to worry about being home from work or not being alcohol or whatever because it's someone I already trust to come in my apartment.
Yeah. Well, that's
not
nice.
A random contractor that I've found, through a friend of a friend or something.
Yeah. I think that's definitely valid. And we have to ask ourselves as operators, like, have we communicated to our people, that they are under most circumstances trying to find a reason to say no, or are they trying to find a reason to say yes? Mm-hmm. And, in services and things like that, like, we've watered plants and fed cats and, hung curtains. And
it's always hard to draw the boundary,
Yeah.
Especially when you have really great leasing staff and manager that is so great at customer service and makes those relationships with residents. It's hard not to be like, sure, Linda, no offense to Linda's, but like, I'll feed your cat while you're out of town because you're so nice and I care about, you know what I mean? Like that, that would be hard.
Yeah. And then some leasing agents would say, well, due to fair housing reasons, I can't treat you differently than someone else. And so I'm not going to feed your cat, or I'm not going to water your plants. And, there's just always questions about that. What else? Helpful amenities. So obviously just additional services was one.
And then, yes, that's one. And then I think it's great, the fun opportunities, like the food truck that come, that might come to the community once a month, the yoga night they might do once a month or whatever. I think those things are awesome and need to stay. I think they don't.
Who comes? See, this is the problem. Well, I'm gonna sit on the side of property management right now and speak for them and say,
but I just thought they were.
That's what I was getting ready to say. That's what I was getting ready to say. You people, you put on our surveys that, we're not offering enough social events. And that we don't feel we don't feel connected. And then you're like, no, you never came one time. And so we really have to try to balance really trying to balance, is that one event every now and again that we spend a lot of money on and then we end up eating all the food ourselves. Is that key to retention, or is key to retention probably communicate.
Yeah, I think that's the key. I don't think it's part of the retention strategy.
Yeah.
I think it's part of the, it was a push and a marketing strategy when, occupancy of apartments started really getting a lot higher, and as among like college kids, young professionals. Like, I do know that there is official data,
of course,
around young professionals now, and like newly married, like more and more living in apartments, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that,
well, one could probably argue that hybrid workers craving some kind of social aspect,
want that connection,
that are missing it, may appreciate filling the void.
That's true.
With the neighbors.
But I'm going to challenge that to tell you, I'm not looking for that in my apartment community. That's me. That's not everyone.
Yeah.
I'm not there to meet best friends. I have those. That's where I live, because now I am in a neighborhood when I move into a house because I know I'm going to be there for 10, 15, 20 years. But an apartment, some people might be there that long, but the majority, right? Like,
yeah. So you think the transient nature of some
that's why
communities, that's why they don't do that.
But I think that there are things you can do. This is something that the office I'm at now does, that their property management company sets up and sends us an email about it when it's happening, and it's mobile car wash. So they will come, and you can like sign up for a slot, I think. I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to do it this next time. And they'll wash your car while you're working at the office. Like they detail it while you're working. You could also do that in an apartment, mobile detailing.
Do you have to move your car, or you just tell them where it is?
Do it.
There you go.
They just do it where it is.
Yeah.
Because it's really the inside of your car. It's not the outside.
Oh,
it's the inside.
I see.
Honestly, you can run through a car wash. That takes 2 minutes.
Right.
But the inside is what, and you go to the car. There's only a few of those places left that do the inside, and they're never up to my type A standards. I don't know about you, but I feel like these people in these mobile car washes really like,
or just mobile services,
or mobile services, period.
Yeah. And maybe that's, maybe that's the new social event. If they're low, and I would say just historically, there's been a couple sites that I've kind of followed that have a following, for lack of a better way of saying it. Like their residents are very like highly trained to know I'm going to get free food. I'm probably going to have fun. There might be booze.
Yeah.
Like all the really important reasons to go. But overall, we can spend money on social events. We have a very low turnout, and it hurts our hearts that we've gone that far. So maybe we transition that to not being at all about getting people out and everything about what do we bring to them. So, the mobile groomers, the mobile, car detailing, mobile dry cleaning. It's not like any of this is new, but I don't know who does it in just like, all in,
right,
and has a menu of items that says.
I had this the like industrial dog wash room and stuff at my
but you still had to go do it, right?
You had to, but what I would say was I never saw one person in there, and it was just this like dirty room. I was just like, ugh, the dog room. Ugh. Because it just looked like a place where dogs got bathed. Even they cleaned it and, they took care of it, but it just
did the best they could.
Yeah, it just wasn't like, no thanks.
But in the spirit of.
But if you had a dog groomer come or, I think you have to marry function with everything you do now.
Yeah. Yeah. Gone are the days probably too, where you just, it's like, this is our property. We're going to let you borrow it. We're not going to do anything more than we have to. Kind of bare minimum. Like everybody has to step it up, and especially on communities that, we can't rebuild them, and we can't always afford to remodel anything. When we can be thoughtful for the hybrid worker. We can be thoughtful for remote workers. We can be thoughtful for our own site teams that might also just want like a private space. I've definitely had leasing associates before that, for reasons for focus, specifically, would probably do better if they had a private space that they could go to do some of that follow-up. But we like to put our leasing people like right up front, like concierge style. And is that environment conducive, anymore to the productivity that we need them to do? Because so much of that work is being done, so much of that funnel work is being done long before a person walks in, if ever.
Well, I think that's why too, they're getting everywhere's getting kiosks, right? Go in, put in what you need help with, rings to the back office, and one of the two leasing agents can go out there. Not that y'all need to invest in more technology.
I don't even think it would take that much technology, but you're saying where we have a heads up on what they want before they sit right in front of us.
And so it's kind of like in the back, it's like a call, you can like, hey, this one's yours, or, you have the expertise with that, or this is, whatever the reason. But then both people aren't being distracted. And
every leasing agent, every office, personnel in multifamily would love it if before they were coming in, they told us like exactly what their needs were. Because we just love it when people are like, hey, you got a minute? Just want to bring something up, and that's our job. Like we're supposed to, but you do.
It's never a minute. And then you hear about their grandmother's surgery, their new dog, which is great unless you're in the middle of trying to do something.
Yeah. And to, I'm not saying I'm not customer service minded. I absolutely am. But like if we're not there for that, then that's 30 to 45 minutes of work time I got back. And would that person leave and go to another community because they didn't get to talk to me? I was the worst. My managers had to hate me in the beginning because I am very social, and I would definitely sit there for as long as anybody wanted to tell me their life story. And that's why still, I run into people in town, and I leased to them 16, 17, 18 years ago. And I'm like, yeah, how's your daughter? Like, I know she was going to IU. And they'll be like, well, she's married with 3 kids. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it has been a minute. But there's a piece of this that says efficiency.
Yeah.
And like, where's the line? We want to find the line. Like, I don't want necessarily to pay someone to listen to the life story unless I absolutely have to get the lease or get the renewal. And that sounds cold. I'm not being...
No.
Well, you call Stone Cold Green is what you call me anyway. Like, it's not that crazy. It's not that crazy. But it is about efficiency. So the other piece of, is the payoff for the operator and the employee, that there's some flexibility, and we've removed that inefficiency, and what will it really cost us on the retention side?
Yeah. And we have to all the time prioritize what's a nice to have and what's critical.
Yeah. We as in
corporate America, in corporate communications, in leader conversations, in what we're communicating to employees, or what we're being asked to do. We have, 3 initiatives we need to get out. Okay, this one's going to be a nice to have. This is critical to the success of this, whatever this means,
Yeah.
But I also think that there's a lot of alignment, even always has been, but even more growing alignment between hospitality and multifamily. So I feel like there's probably a lot of benchmarking that could be done in the hospitality space, the, commercial hospitality space of, benchmarking with hotels. How are y'all handling this? What does AI look like in the space of corporate or commercial hospitality right now?
Yeah.
How do you hire talent? They need to be on site. How do you handle that? What are you hearing from your employees? That might be a point of intersection to help kind of.
I think a little bit. I think the gap though is the commitment. We can all survive making a poor decision on, like a hotel website. Like, it looked really good. I know it said 4 stars, but to me it wasn't. We can all survive that for a night. I think the buying decision for some people, choosing that apartment is the biggest thing they've ever done. In terms of the spend. And so I do think we can take some cues from hospitality. And clearly when we're building big fancy new apartments, all the lobbies look like lobbies. It's legit, and
keep saying lobby.
All right, well,
it feels natural, doesn't it?
It does. So anyway, I do think that we're trying to build it to look like a hotel, because there's something exciting about walking into a hotel, even if, you're there a night or 4 nights.
Scent marketing, I'm telling you. Every time.
Gosh, I know.
Every time.
There's one apartment community in this city. I'm not going to name it necessarily, but either way, I walked into it and it smelled like the resort that my friend Sam got married at. And I was like, wait, it brought me right back to different times in a good way. Yeah, it is definitely gold.
The last thing I want to add is a kid's pool, or zero gravity entrance into pool or something. I think that having that option, I don't know. I just feel like I haven't seen that at a lot of apartment communities.
You're seeing the sunning ledges, where it's this much water, but we've got, chairs placed in it. But I wouldn't say the purpose and intent is about children or safety or zero barrier.
Yeah. Equal opportunity housing, everyone.
Yeah.
But, there are a lot of kids in apartments and babies in apartments and things like that. So, and I think that also might help.
I think the reality too, in who most enjoys a pool. I think a lot of us enjoy a pool atmosphere. Who wants to be splashing in the water? That's probably based on whatever unit mix we have, what we should be building for and considering. And I've never.
Yeah, if you're next door to a college, you probably don't need a baby pool, but
I don't know. Safety first. It might not be the worst idea. Splash pad for 19-year-olds. I don't know. Let's ask Finley what she thinks. I think that's a good comment though. Like as we're designing them, and that too is where, from a management team, like the management team needs to be brought in more at the development level and with the architect, like. It should be part of that. I'm very fortunate where I've worked before that we were part of those conversations so we could talk about the humans that are going to enjoy the space later. Now, I didn't ever do the kiddie pool. I'm sorry.
I think people just want to see growth. The world is growing. All the DE&I efforts are growing. Inclusivity, empathy, all these things are growing. Working from home, technology, all those kinds of things. I think people want to see that out of their homes too.
Yeah. They want to see something new and different. Yeah. And I hate that in multifamily, a lot of times we just are like, look, we're just
carbon copies.
Yeah, kind of.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Walls and floors and kitchens. Well, definitely that. Maintenance would appreciate that. But yeah, just, trying to have an identity a little bit differently, and then also make sure that we're serving the hybrid and remote worker so we can just keep them a little longer so they don't have the pain of looking for more space or different space or noise, and whatever ultimately that looks like.
My hacking cough in this interview.
Yeah, that was really great.
They can edit that out. Sorry, folks. That's what happens when you have a kid in daycare.
Well, Lindsay, I very much appreciate that you joined me today.
For it to be over.
Yeah, I love, Lindsay, she's not saying this out loud, but like what she really wants is to be a repeat guest.
Okay. This disclosure, I've always wanted to be interviewed. And this is the first time I'm not a very important person because this is the first time I've ever been interviewed. So thank you, Katrina, for making my dreams come true.
Well, being at the, top level and having to communicate to people that they were, headed home, to be communicating to people that they were coming back. We could probably do a whole episode on. Actually, maybe let's just do this because it might be fun to make it. Like, give me some of like the top excuses or reasons. I'm going to say reasons. I shouldn't say excuses for people to, decline to come back into the office or refuse to come back into the office.
What's so funny is have you ever heard of Yammer? It's
absolutely
it's like Slack or the things companies are using now. So we had an all company Yammer, and let me tell you. It blew our minds that people didn't realize, or maybe they did realize, that their managers could see these, that the senior most leaders in the company could see these comments.
Okay.
There were a couple repeat offenders, and we would always be like, beep, beep, post it again this morning. And they just put it out there. It's crazy. But, I never really heard crazy responses for why they couldn't come in. Because, I wasn't communicating one-on-one with the employees like that.
Right.
That would have been with their managers.
Right.
But most people were just honest and said, I just don't want to. They were just like, my family, at risk. I would say it got more crazy with the vaccines. Like more so than you have to come to work or not to come to work.
Yeah.
When it wasn't mandated that you had to get a vaccine, but there was a time where you had to be vaccinated to come into the office.
Okay.
And you had to show proof of your vaccination.
Okay.
And that was really
because people just didn't.
Some people
maybe read it thoroughly and understand, but they weren't being made to come back in the office. It was just it was
a principle that, hey, where is this company headed? What's the political party associate? It just got real off the rails.
Okay.
Yeah.
And has anyone, have you seen any turnover, or did you see any turnover when there was, communication or requirements?
No, I didn't. But again, I didn't from the corporate level.
Yeah.
Again, that was another on-site versus not on-site. We didn't have to come into the office, so we didn't have to get vaccinated if we didn't want to go in the office.
Right.
We had to, I believe, get vaccinated to work in a plant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, different.
Yeah.
Definitely a different situation for sure. Yeah. Well, definitely excited to see what keeps happening. And I'm so excited. Congrats on your new role. And maybe over time we can somehow get some recap information out to our listeners about where things are headed. So thank you so much.
I'm just so thrilled I was asked to be on this. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I hope I get to come back, and I can't wait to listen to all your other episodes.
Yes. Subscribe to the complex.
Say, like and subscribe.
I'm supposed to. Okay.
That's what influencers say, I think. Like and subscribe.
Okay. Nailed it. Okay. Like and subscribe to the I didn't even say my own podcast right.
Time.
So like and subscribe to The Complex. See you next time.
Bye.